As dawn broke on the 10th of August, 1792, the royal family was jolted awake in the Tuileries palace by the ominous clang of warning bells, a sound that reverberated throughout Paris, signaling a gathering storm. A formidable mob of National Guardsmen, fédérés, and armed citizens, many of them once the king's loyal subjects, was amassing, their singular purpose to breach the palace walls. For Marie Antoinette, this moment marked the final, terrifying unraveling of her royal existence, a stark contrast to just 3 years prior when she reigned as the resplendent Queen of France. Now, huddled behind barricaded doors, she could only await the monarchy's imminent collapse, a grim chapter in France's dark history. The Tuileries had transformed from a palace into their gilded prison, a confinement that began after their disastrous attempt to flee to Varennes in June of 1791. That single act of desperation shattered the last vestiges of trust between the king and the revolutionaries. From that moment forward, public animosity surged, aimed not only at Louis XVI, but with a venomous intensity reserved especially for Marie Antoinette. In scathing pamphlets and cruel caricatures, she was branded Madame Deficit, accused of secretly sabotaging France. Her Austrian heritage served only to fuel the pervasive suspicions of her treachery. As the insurgent tide swelled towards the palace on that fateful August morning, the loyal royal guard's Swiss mercenaries sworn to the king prepared to make a stand. But Louis XVI, plagued by hesitation and indecisiveness, refused to give the order to use force. Instead, he chose to lead his family on a desperate walk across the gardens, seeking refuge with the National Convention, located in the adjacent Legislative Assembly. The palace, now abandoned, was left to its fate, and within mere hours, it was completely overrun by the mob. The violence that ensued was staggering. Hundreds perished, among them dozens of the king's most devoted guards. On that very day, the French monarchy was officially suspended. Under heavy armed guard, the royal family was transported to the Temple, a foreboding medieval fortress in Paris. For Marie Antoinette, the transformation from queen to common prisoner was now brutally complete. Stripped of her royal titles, she was referred to in revolutionary rhetoric simply as the widow Capet, a chilling moniker given even while her husband, the king, was still alive. She would never see the inside of a palace again. Alone in the Conciergerie, the queen's truly terrifying imprisonment was about to begin. In the dead of night on August 2nd, 1793, officials from the Paris Commune entered the Temple prison with a new decree for Marie Antoinette. She was to be moved. The official records of the Revolutionary Tribunal state she was escorted under the cover of pre-dawn darkness to the Conciergerie, a notorious prison on the Isle de la Cite, grimly known as the antechamber to the guillotine. This transfer marked her final, complete separation from what remained of her family. Her daughter, known as Madame Royale, would later write in her memoirs of their final embrace, a silent farewell where her mother uttered not a single word, acutely aware that any spoken sentiment would be overheard by their captors. The prison registry coldly logged her arrival as Widow Capet, a name deliberately chosen by the revolutionary authorities as a final act to obliterate her royal identity. Her cell, situated in the women's wing, was perched just above the river. Surviving plans of the Conciergerie from that era, including detailed drawings archived by the Commission des Monuments Historiques, reveal a space measuring a mere 3 by 2 meters, a cold tomb enclosed by stone walls, iron bars, and a single, narrow slit for a window. Eyewitness accounts, like those from prison reformer Jacques-Pierre Brissot, paint a horrific picture, describing the women's cells as cold, perpetually damp, and crawling with lice and rats, a true glimpse into this era's dark history. Upon her arrival, she was provided no bed, forced to sleep on a pile of straw. An official decree issued on the 5th of August, 1793, mandated that she be subjected to constant surveillance, with absolutely no interruption. 2 guards were stationed inside her tiny cell around the clock, cruelly refusing to grant her any privacy, even as she changed her clothes or tried to maintain her hygiene. During his testimony before the tribunal, an officer named Jean-Baptiste Michonis confirmed that she was afforded 0 privacy. The notes of a prison doctor, which have been preserved in the archives of the Paris Revolutionary Committee, documented the former queen's deteriorating health, noting symptoms of severe uterine hemorrhaging, along with extreme weight loss and debilitating exhaustion. Yet, this doctor was granted only the most limited access to her, By the end of September, her physical appearance had altered dramatically. Observers of the time, including the British ambassador Lord Gower, noted in their reports a shocking transformation. Her hair had turned completely white from the stress and suffering. In one last, desperate act of defiance, Marie Antoinette tried to smuggle a secret note to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. This poignant letter, now carefully preserved in the Archives Nationales, was intercepted and tragically never reached its destination. Within it, her final words were simple. With all hope extinguished from her world, the Queen faced the ultimate humiliation. Her trial before the Revolutionary Tribunal, a bleak spectacle of justice turned vengeance. The proceedings commenced on the morning of October 14th, 1793, within the imposing main hall of the Conciergerie. Official transcripts, later published in the Bulletin du Tribunal Révolutionnaire, reveal a litany of charges far exceeding mere treason. She stood accused of masterminding counter-revolutionary conspiracies, conspiring with foreign powers, and, in the most infamous charge of all, of committing unspeakable acts with her own young son, the Dauphin Louis Charles. This final, horrifying accusation, founded on claims coerced from the imprisoned child, was so vile that even some revolutionaries condemned it as a depraved political maneuver, a true low point in this chapter of dark history. The trial was orchestrated by Antoine Constant Foucault-Tinville, the notorious public prosecutor of the tribunal. Infamous for his efficiency in arranging swift journeys to the guillotine, armed guards encircled the courtroom, which was deliberately packed with spectators hand-picked for their loyalty to the Jacobin cause. According to dispatches from the British diplomat Francis Jackson, who gathered first-hand accounts, the atmosphere was less a hall of justice and more a theatre of public vengeance. Marie Antoinette appeared in a simple black dress and a white bonnet, and eyewitnesses like the journalist Prudhomme documented her hollow eyes and deathly pallor. Yet, even he conceded that she held herself with an unyielding posture. When questioned about her letters to foreign powers, she flatly denied any part in military schemes. But in response to the heinous accusation involving her son, her only recorded words were a powerful plea: "I appeal to all mothers." A stunned silence reportedly fell over the courtroom, as even her staunchest enemies were said to hesitate. The prosecution's case, a cornerstone of this moment in dark history, was built almost entirely on rumor and twisted interpretations of her private correspondence. Much of this correspondence had been confiscated during the violent storming of the Tuileries in 1792, and the infamous armoire de fer, a secret safe unearthed within the palace walls, was brandished as definitive proof of her clandestine dealings, though in truth, most of the documents were ambiguous, at best, or entirely irrelevant to her personal actions. After 2 grueling days of testimony, with a defense that was virtually non-existent and no chance to summon witnesses, the jury delivered its unanimous, foregone conclusion: death by the guillotine. The former queen displayed no discernible reaction. The sentence was formally read in the courtroom at 4 o'clock in the morning on October 16th, leaving her just a few fleeting hours to prepare for her own demise. The final journey to death began, marking the Queen's last moments on Earth. At 7 in the morning, on October 16th, 1793, Marie Antoinette was roused from her cell in the Conciergerie. According to official prison logs and the detailed account of Marie Groschholz, who would later become the famous Madame Tussaud and was present in the prison at that very time, she was permitted to change into a plain white chemise, after which her hands were cruelly bound behind her back, a stark contrast to the treatment of her husband, Louis XVI, who had met his fate that January. She was denied the dignity of a closed carriage and was instead forced into an open wooden cart, the very same type used to transport common criminals to their doom. The route from the Conciergerie to the Place de la Révolution was intentionally drawn out, with contemporary police reports detailing the escort. It was comprised of gendarmes and National Guards, with mounted soldiers flanking the crude cart as the grim procession snaked its way through the Rue Saint-Honoré. There, thousands of spectators had gathered, lining the streets for a view. One of the most vivid accounts originates from Jacques Roux, a radical revolutionary who watched the entire spectacle unfold. He noted that the former queen remained utterly silent, her head held high, her gaze locked forward. This agonizing journey by cart lasted for more than an hour, and multiple witnesses remarked on her physical state. Her white hair had been crudely shorn by the executioner's assistant, a customary preparation for the blade. Upon reaching the scaffold, the executioner, Henri Sanson, assisted her in climbing the final steps. In a deposition he gave later in life, he recalled that she inadvertently stepped on his foot and offered an immediate apology. Her last recorded words on this earth were, "Pardon me, sir, I did not mean to do it." At precisely 12:15 in the afternoon, the heavy blade of the guillotine descended. Official records of the execution state that the crowd erupted in shouts, crying "Vive la République." Yet, numerous observers, including the journalist Mercier, noted that a chilling, momentary silence fell first. Her body was then placed into a common coffin and unceremoniously buried in an unmarked grave in the Cimetière de la Madeleine, joining the hundreds of other victims of the terror, closing a final, grim chapter of France's dark history. It was not until the year 1815, with the Bourbon Restoration in power, that her remains were finally unearthed and reinterred within the Basilica of Saint-Denis, the sacred and traditional resting place of French royalty. The downfall of Marie Antoinette was far more than the death of a monarch. It was a pivotal moment in the nation's dark history. It signified the utter destruction of an ancient order built upon divine right and inherited privilege. Her trial and execution starkly revealed how a revolution can devour its own symbols with the same ferocity it uses to create them. Share your thoughts below. Did her death deliver justice for the people, or did this chapter of dark history merely birth a new tyranny from vengeance? As she professed in her final letter to Madame Elizabeth on the morning she faced her fate, "I forgive all my enemies. I die in the hope," she wrote, "that my death will unite my children."